We'll go ahead and kick things off here. Just in case anyone's in the wrong room, this is the Industry Insights from a Hollywood Editor session. I'm Andy Cook. I'm with Avid. I head up education strategy, as I mentioned in the other room, working a lot with schools to get Avid software implemented, be that Sibelius, Pro Tools, Media Composer. We also have a wide range of hardware solutions, shared storage, media management, live sound consoles, mixing consoles. So we work with schools and we have partnerships that help enable all of those. We also have the curriculum and the certification programs and teacher education and certification programs as well. So as I mentioned, if you're interested in any of that, we've got the table outside. Dawn and I will be there to talk with you. So let me just kick off what this session's about. So first of all, just to set the foundation in case there are people who aren't familiar with who Avid is. The films industry leading audio and video professionals rely on Avid to create the most prestigious and award-winning films. At this year's Academy Awards, every Best Picture, Film Editing, Sound Editing, and Sound Mixing nominee were created using Avid tools. So that should hopefully get you an idea of who we are and our place in the industry. So that's why we invited Chris to come in today and speak a little bit to what goes on behind the scenes using the Avid tools and just getting us insight on how he has established his illustrious career in the industry. And let me just read a little bit of Chris's bio here. Chris Nelson's career is long and varied. He worked as a producer, director, and film editor for television, cable movies, pilot series, and feature films. Chris has received Best Editing Emmy nominations for 6 Feet Under, China Beach, Mad Men, Greatest American Hero Pilots, fantastic show. He also received an American Cinema Editors Eddie Award nomination for editing The West Wing pilot and won the Emmy for the series finale of Lost. He recently finished editing When We Rise, a miniseries in the history of gay rights movement, and currently he is producer on cable series Bates Motel. Does that pretty much sum it up?
That's pretty much it.
Excellent. So yeah, we're really excited to have Chris here today. Also, Don Roars with Avid. So Don and I will be helping just queue up some questions for Chris. But we also want to make this interactive and not wait till the end for questions. So if you guys have burning questions where you see something and it triggers something, feel free to just get our attention and we'll kind of keep it fairly informal. Okay. So you want to say anything before we kick off with some questions to you here?
Sure. I've come out and done this for Avid quite a few times, and this is the first time it's not like at the university or college level. And so one of the things is I didn't go to college. And I have a fairly strong opinion on creativity and how you can't really teach it, you can cultivate it, and that well, especially in today's environment, that the education is really expensive. Unless people have, parents with deep pockets, you really have to make sure you're getting your money's worth, and how that relates to the film business as well. So, as we go, and talk, any question, interrupt any time, because I want to know how, what we can say or how we can tailor our conversation so it really is informative to what you guys need. Absolutely.
Thank you.
So let's start off with just how you got into the industry and how that came about.
I started off with the cliche start of all times. I started in the mailroom at Universal. And I was the only one there who was not actually hooked to somebody in upper management. And so about 6 weeks into my stay there, there came an opening in the stock film library. And it paid more than the job I had. And it was under the auspices of the umbrella of the Editors Guild. So I became an apprentice in the stock film library. Within 6 months, one of the stock film librarians went on to be an assistant film editor. I took his place, and then I stayed there for another 4 years until I became an assistant editor. In the days when I started, the Editors Guild had like a group system, and you had to be in the union for 8 years before you could be an editor. And it was broken up to Group 3, which was the first 4 years, Group 2 was the second 4 years, and then you were Group 1 and you could do anything. And so there were certain restraints on if you were a Group 3 trying to be an assistant, a Group 2 could bump you. So I stayed in the film library to where I thought I could have relatively consistent work. And then I was actually only an assistant editor for like a little over 2.5 years. And I got an opportunity to move up at like 7 years and 7 months or something, but it happened right at the fall when it was really busy, so they made an exception and let me get moved up. And so, you know, within that experience and how I see people that are going to wind up doing what I do now, believe it or not, the apprenticeship is about the same length of time. You know, most people from the time they start, it's going to be an easy 6 to 10 years before they can be an editor. You know, people that make a nice living as an assistant editor, I would imagine you can make about, depending, you know, in television you make maybe about what police officers make maybe as an assistant film editor. My girlfriend was one of the editors on the next Guardians of the Galaxy. And the assistant editors on that feature were making more than I make as an editor in television. And shockingly, some of them weren't as good as the assistants we had. So, you know, there's a tremendous amount of luck, and you know, and what I've tried to figure out, and you know, sometimes a little too late, is that, you know, what paths can we choose that may help influence our luck path and put us in the proper place at the right time, so if something could happen, rather than just letting fate determine everything. You know, as you can see, you know, I've been successful as an editor in TV, and I can't get arrested on a feature. You know, I cannot get an interview for a job on a $5 million feature where ultimately they'll hire somebody who was an assistant editor in features 2 years ago. You know, it makes no sense. It's just the way it is. So, you know, there are certain strategies, but then again, there's a lot of assistant editors that ultimately become feature editors, but it could take them 12 to 15 years sometimes.
Is it easier being male or female? You notice with your girlfriend, like,
you know, I think there's an inherent bias across our whole culture, even when we don't think there is. So, you know, I don't know how to, so I don't know how to qualify that. I know that, like in television, if you were going to, normal television would be 3 editors and 3 assistants. You know, today we would absolutely make sure that, you know, if we could, that one of them, you know, one of the editors would be a woman. We would,
for one of theirs, you know.
well, you know, and it's the same thing with minorities as well. You know, it is that, and it's very prevalent in our business. The Directors Guild is very, you know, very interested in promoting minorities. You know, I have a couple of friends with Spanish surnames, and you know, and I go, take advantage of it. You know, there's a woman I know who's, you know, an assistant wanting to be an editor, and I say, you have more advantage than your male counterparts today as far as getting moved up. So, you know, it's just the way the world is right now in our country, and I think there's nothing wrong with, if you're aware of it, you shouldn't. Yeah, you shouldn't get a job that you're unqualified for. But if you're equally qualified, why not use that little advantage? You know.
Man, well said.
What was the first project you used AME on?
I was a, quote, film editor. Through all of the 80s, Lorimar was using a variety of video editing systems, none of which were very good, but they made a big commitment to it, and somehow I stayed out of cutting film until I think the early 90s or something. Wow. And I got a job on a pilot, and Avid was pretty new. I mean, you know, in the feature world, there was this other system called Lightworks, and I never worked on Lightworks, but I understood that it and Avid were really rather similar to each other. But in the early days, nonlinear digital storage was extraordinarily expensive. And so the concept of a full nonlinear editing system rather than only 2 seconds on either side of the cut or something was like, it was like magic. To let you know, as soon as well, I guess I'll do this first. So anyway, so I got an interview for a half-hour pilot. And they said, did I know Avid? And I said, no. They said, oh, we'll train you. And I went, cool. But what they never asked was, had I ever cut on any other system? So in the entertainment business, just generally, when someone says, can you do something, you say yes. And then you go in the other room and freak out and figure out how to do it, you know. And it's really, if you just do it. And if you have to work all night and you call everybody you know, and it's the only way to, you know, opportunities don't come along very often, or they could be spaced out quite a bit. So anyway, as it turned out, I was finishing a TV movie, and we were on the mix stage, and I had literally 2 hours of training before we started the show. In those days, what we used to call the flex file, which was the database for the dailies that was imported, had to be done. It was being done in like North Carolina, and it had to be done by hand. And in those days, you only had one system per show. So my assistant worked at night, and I worked during the day, and I didn't even know how to turn it on. I mean, honest to God, I pulled out the instruction book to figure out how to do a dissolve in front of the director.
There still are editors out there that couch and tell their assistant to push the buttons. How to edit. So as funny as that sounds, things are still the same as much as they're different.
But essentially, unlike any other editing system before or since, Media Composer was created with heavy input from film editors. So if you're an editor, it's extremely logical to how you do things. And so and in like most systems, you can either just with the mouse push icon buttons for things, or you can program things to the keyboard. Keyboard's ultimately faster, but if it's day one, you go, okay, I need to know these 5 commands, and you can get away with it. And I knew how to mark in, mark out, make the cut, make another one, and then there's a trim mode thing so I could adjust it. And that's all I needed to know, because as a editor in dramatic programming, that's about all we do. And right off the bat, I'd never even known any piece of equipment as a film editor, and I went, this is really special. So I think it was about 3 years before I could figure out how to buy one.
Yeah.
And when I bought one, I think with a tech, it was $110,000. Oh yeah, it was really steep. And there was a company.
Avid, right? Which do I buy?
Oh, it was, but I just kind of had this, you know, whatever it was, sense. And I think there was a company, I think it was called Terminal Marketing or something, and you put $10,000 down, and the rest, my payments were like $4,800 a month. Wow. Which was more than everything else. Yeah. But I went, if I worked 9 months a year, well, rents were also $2,500 a week then. So for your system.
Rent your system out.
Right.
So renting my system out was $2,500 a week. Now it's like, I don't know, $600 or something. Yeah. For essentially the same thing. But when I bought it, you'll understand the difference of technology. It came with 28 megabytes of RAM. Seriously, megabytes. Recommended upgrade to 40 megabytes for $700. And storage, at that time, they'd just gone from, there was these drives, and I think the drives were really strong, and I think they had ultimately, or originally came from like tanks or something.
That's in the 90s? Is that in the 90s?
Early
And
90s.
so we used to call, they were like shoe boxes, okay? And each one was 3 gigabytes. And when right at the time I bought my system, they came out with 9 gigabyte drives. They were $5,200 a piece, and I needed 3 to be able to cut a TV movie at mediocre resolution. So the fact that I can work completely independent on my laptop on battery power is, you know, kind of magic. But so, you know, I guess getting into, you know, your needs and your students, and, you know, the fact that you're all from California, I think is, I've gone around the country to a lot of places, and I remember I went to LA Film School, and you know, the auditorium was pretty full, and I was like, there are more people in this auditorium than there are jobs available for these people.
Yeah.
So the geographic availability to the business is, you know, I can't even imagine the difference it must make in success or failure. But also, across the, you know, I've also become aware of, I mean, I don't know how many jobs there are for what I do. I bet there's less than 2,000 people in the whole country that cut, let's say, dramatic programming, television or features. And, you know, that's a really small club.
And they're not just picking them all out of film school.
Right.
You. Yeah.
Well, you know, here's the deal too, like, when we hire, you know, if let's say somebody, either, you know, one of your students or somebody, you know, from a college or something, they want to be a film editor, let's say. So the best path for them would be to try to become a post PA somewhere, and which is a, you know, non-technical job. And, you know, pedigree of the school they went to can definitely make a difference. But what I found for me, if somebody shows up and says, I'm media composer certified, you know, so I know the tool, and I want to be an editor, it makes a huge difference. I've seen a lot of people that come in and say, you know, I want to be an editor, but, you know, I think I might want to be a director and all that. And I go, don't tell them any of your other dreams. Right. Tell them the only thing you want is to grow through the job they have to offer, even if it's a complete lie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's what people want to hear. And there is nothing you can do in the film business that doesn't teach you something that can relate to another part of the film business. Everything we do, the more I spend time as a producer or a director, the better it makes my editing skills. It tunes me up in a different way. So, you know, early on when I was a film assistant and I was spending some time on the set, you know, we'd always go, oh, why do they do this? How come this, you know, they don't have time for clappers and all that? We spend time on the set and you realize you've got a star there and a sun setting, and you realize there's no time. So stuff happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Are you as passionate about editing as you sound? I mean, or is that a job for you? We work with a lot.
Yes and no. You know, I would say, like, also I've been sawing on this log for a long time, so it's kind of lost a little bit of, you know. But you know, a good part of what we work on isn't very good, no matter where you work. You know, if you get to, you know, I have friends who do big features, but they're, you know, I'm sure if you went and looked at all the dailies on Guardians, you would realize how ordinary the performances were, how corny it was. But when you finish putting it together and you put all the window dressing on top of it, and you stop looking at that stuff and just look at the story, you know, the fun of it, it's something else. But one of the things that's unique to editing, let's see, a director of photography goes on the set today and he shoots, you know, they work today. And when he goes home tonight, today is gone. There is no hangover at all. Only what's ahead of him is tomorrow. And as an editor, from the time they turn on the camera to the time we're done with the show, everything is our problem.
So there's no sleeping. Sleeping is not.
Well, I mean, I've had times like that. But, you know, usually, you know, we're sort of confined to like a 12-hour day. They can certainly be longer if you're doing pilots or if you're in a tough delivery schedule and all that. But in trying to address your question, sometimes what happens, you know, if you're working on something that's really good, it really, you know, good film inspires us and charges us and fuels us, and bad film is kind of like an energy vampire. You know, essentially all you want to do is punch out and have a drink because it sucked your life from you. Where something that's good, essentially you are going, you know, as you're driving home, your mind is still turning because it's stimulated you in the right way.
At what point do you know it's a bad film?
Okay. Okay. No, I can do better than that. I did a pilot. I can't remember, like 5 or 6 years ago, and it was a remake of Kolchak the Night Stalker from the '70s, and which has become really iconic. And I was like, oh, how much fun! And Frank Spotnitz, who did he's Man in the High Castle now, and he'd done whatchamacallit. Thank you. And he was on it. It was like, this is be great. And they didn't have the whole cast in place when I got the job. And one day I went into the office to sign some paperwork. And you typically in the office, they put, like the headshot pictures of the cast as they get them, who they are. So there's usually a wall somewhere with all the players. And I won't name the actor, but there was this guy there. And I just looked at that picture and went, oh, we're so screwed. I swear to God that, it was like, why don't we just divide the money up now? Because a few months from now, it's not going to make any difference. And it was a mistake compounded in a lot of different ways as far as tone and everything else. But we worked horrible hours on that show. It was one of the few shows where I actually thought they were trying to kill me.
Yeah.
It was like 17-hour days for, 12 days, followed by 28-hour days, followed by 12-hour days, just over and over, because it wasn't good. And they didn't have the answers to the problems either. And while we were shooting, they reshot the action scene twice, and then I didn't go back on the show. It sold, and it sold, I think, primarily because ABC and their executives had invested so much into this, they couldn't walk away from it. And I didn't want to be part of it. And I know over the summer they reshot that again, and recut it yet again. And I think they were in production on episode 5 or 6 or something like that. It had just gone on the air, and they pulled the plug. They were on the mixing stage, and they said, just go home. Which is really unusual, because usually shows that are in post-production, they want to finish, because even if it's a bad show, it's going to be part of some library that's going to get sold somewhere. Right. But it was such a vote of no confidence. And it was like, yeah, so sometimes you know really early, but you also know when the alchemy is right, because there is this magic that you can't calculate. We've all seen movies that are kind of flat, and they've got like all the right people in there. I mean, the pedigree is just, everything should work, and they're just, ordinary or something. And then there's other ones where something happens and the total is way greater than the sum of its parts. Some, magic chemistry between people, or something we relate to.
And as an editor, that's got to be pretty motivating, right? To your point, to start to really see some good acting and to see some good DP work where it becomes...
we work the hardest on the worst stuff because we work on it over and over again. And actually, I think, I know I learn more by working on bad stuff than on good stuff. Because when something's good, it's good. And, so do I want to tweak it a little bit? Sure. But when something is just functionally not working, you really have to analyze the whys and hows and all that stuff, and you learn a lot by, I don't have something here to show that I used to have to show, but there was like a scene from a TV movie I did, and it was a love scene, and the director shot it as just one piece, and it started with basically two people coming together through a doorway, and she starts to unbutton, he starts to unbutton, and the camera just kind of did this, and then kind of went to her, and kind of went to him, and then they looked at each other for a while, and then they kissed, and then that turned into them rolling on the bed, and it really didn't work, and it was like, holy crap! I mean, it did not work at all. And the director was a friend of mine, who's also the executive producer, and he said, I want it to be like Out of Sight, which is the Steve Soderbergh picture with J-Lo and George Clooney.
Yeah.
And there was a scene in the bar in that where they intercut the sitting having a drink, and there was one drink between them and their hands almost touched, and that was intercut with them in the bedroom. And the question for years was that pre-planned, or did they figure that afterwards? But John went, so I want it to be something like that. And I was like, John, I have one shot. I had like 5 takes of it, but I only had one shot. And so he was leaving to go out of town for something, and I was going, well, maybe I can dissolve from one thing to another. And in the process of just kind of thinking about this, I was going, well, what was the thing that made that work? And it was quite a while ago I did this. It was that in film, human interaction, like love scene, all the sexual tension comes in the foreplay. It's not about when they start to kiss and all that stuff. Everything is in the characters before that happens. And so, because I figured that out from the other thing, when I really started to think about it, I was like, okay, so what I need to do is figure out how to protract that as much as possible. And so when I dissolved something, I went, oh, well, that looks kind of pretty. And then I went, what if I superimpose, so I had multiple images of these things going on? And that was kind of cool. But like once you start something, it's like, how do I get out of this? What do I do now? How do I sustain it? And I realized pretty quickly that once I started it, I had to go on for like a minute and a half that way. I couldn't do it any other way. So it took me like 2 days, and in those days, superimposers were not real-time effects in Media Composer. So if you moved one frame, the entire thing had to be re-rendered. And so, it was like move a frame, wait 2.5 minutes, but you learn from that. You learn, I would say the best filmmakers in whatever category we find ourselves are the best kind of natural students of human nature. People, the shows that we watch, that we'll watch repeatedly, like, the same movie, tend to be ones where we engage in the characters, not just the action. Whether it be, like the best versions of whether it be a car chase or a chase in space is not the window dressing of what the cars are doing, but it's one person trying to get away from somebody else, or that it's one person trying to get the other person. It's about those people, and if you can keep it centered on those people, then we're engaged. It's not just a random series of cool shots. And so, that's what? Yeah. But he has a really good eye.
Yeah. So what did you bring for us today to see, Chris?
So I brought some stuff from Lost. I have it like editor's cut, which is the very first version, and then the first set of changes, and then the final version. And what it was, could have been season 5 maybe? We did 6 seasons. Our Lost character, I don't know how many of you are familiar, but in a nutshell, our Lost characters many of them had got off the island, but they at a certain point realized they had to all get rounded up and get on a plane and go back to the island in order for everybody else to get off. So that was kind of the thing. And in the previous episode, they got all our characters that we care about on the plane. So my episode is the plane crashes on the island, or lands on the island. And because they didn't want to waste a lot of time, they only shot the people in the cockpit. They figured it's just the guys in the cockpit flying and what's out the window, and we'll get the plane on the ground and then the story can get started. And what happened is, as soon as we saw that, it was like, oh shit, we're so wrong. We don't care about these guys. And even though we didn't shoot anything for it, we need to now make it about something else. And so I had all the film from the previous show, but had to try to figure out how to use it in a way that didn't feel like it was part of this other show. And also, we knew the flight path was really bogus, so we had to, we were still in pre-visual effects stuff, so we had to change the flight path. The They wanted the plane to roll over 360 degrees, and production didn't do it. You know, they said, oh, we can't do it, and then Damon and Carlton are going, yeah, well, we still want it. So to roll a 16:9 frame 90 degrees is like a 233% blow up or something to be able to do that with it. So we had to do some of that, and they just hadn't figured out the story part of it right. You know, they're flying at night, and you know, an event happens, and it's like, oh wow, there's a mountain, there's an island, you know, and it was like, it's day, you know. So you know, we needed to build some things, and I said, well, why don't they come out from, you know, and just go, holy shit, what's going on, above a cloud cover, and then lose engines and fall through the clouds and discover the island. And so a lot of times, you know, like as an editor, kind of we work at the pleasure of those that we work for. And you know, there are some people that are super dogmatic, and all they want is what they ask you to do. And then there's others where it's a completely collaborative relationship where it's, you know, fit equal, or sometimes they even trust you more than themselves, depending on where they are. Right. There was, in the finale of Lost, and I can't remember what the sequence was, but there was something, and all three of us editors went, this just doesn't feel right. It was the way, the structure of the show. And Damon was like, no, I really like it that way, but it really scares me that all three of you guys feel differently. So he deferred. You know, but it's not always like that.
But I think as an editor, you kind of look to projects where if you skew more,
if you can
have a creative input, or you just want to be that, you know,
yeah,
I'll cut to time kind of guy. But you
well, it's really boring. You know, it's like if you're working with somebody and all they want is what they want, then you just kind of check your brain at the door and go, okay, what do you want now? Right. Okay, and you know, and as a professional, you try to achieve that in the best way you can. You know, like a lot of times, and this applies in the editing room as well, but we get notes from the studio or the network, and it's safe to say that a lot of people think a lot of the notes we get from them are really stupid. And depending on how much power your executive producers on the show have, or not, maybe depend on how many will get done. Like on Lost, Damon and Carlton never took a network note phone call. As editors, we took them, and we knew what they wanted or didn't want, so we would try to skew them that way. And if we couldn't talk them out of it, then we take the notes and then we call them and say, okay, here's what they want to do, and they would go, sure, that's okay. No, sure, try that, and then that's how it was. But a lot of times what I found, no matter who gives you the note, even if it's a stupid note, they're giving you a note for a reason. And they don't know what it is, but something bothered them somewhere. And so what I found in my own career was trying to go, not do what you're asking me to do. You know, obviously there's a lot of times where it's just straightforward like that, but what is it that you're bumping on? What is it that you want to see or don't want to see? And rather than what you're telling me to do, what's the root of that? And then from that you can figure out how to make the adjustment. With Carlton, I worked on a pretty short-run series a couple years ago. I did the pilot. It was called The Returned, remake of a French show. And somehow they thought that just basically redoing the French pilot would work for American television, and it just didn't work I can't even tell, because as an American watching a French show with actors I don't know, I have a totally different perspective on some other version of that same thing. But there was a structural problem that I knew was a structural problem from the time I was putting it together in the very beginning of the show, and there was no way to solve it. And then we decided to reshoot one scene early in the show, and I said, you know, if we make him get the phone call in that scene, rather than over here, then I can move all these things around and I can solve the whole structure of the show. Right. And he just kind of looked at me and went, Okay. It's like we were able to recreate the piece of the puzzle that was broken. And yes.
It sounds like a whole set of skills besides just working on the programs. How do you bring those types of real world experiences into like a high school setting? Like, solve these like story problems and deal with other people?
Well, I would say probably in the beginning, your ability to solve story problems is pretty, limited. But I have been through that storytelling process when you figure out maybe all the different episodes of things I've either edited or produced on or whatever. We're talking about hundreds of times, telling a story. And, whether it's a feature or whether it's an hour episode of something, it's a whole contained story. And they all inherently potentially have certain problems. And so you learn from experience. Honestly, everything I do is just instinct. When I first became a film assistant editor, literally, I think it was my first or second day in the room, we were film. The editor, which was kind of unusual, he was a really great guy, gave me a scene to cut. And, I didn't know how to do it without breaking the film, okay? But, it was like 3 rolls about this big, which is about a 30-second scene. And there was only one, I had to work at night or in the morning before he came because there was only one movie to work on. And it took me a week to do that. And there was literally a splice on every frame. But when I reference back to that, what I knew was, I don't like that. That sucks. Do it again. So if you have a fundamental taste, and I don't know how you define that, and enough tenacity to just keep doing it, because what happens is you fundamentally go, I don't like that.
Learn by failing.
And then you go, okay, so what if I try this? Well, I don't like that either. Well, what if I try that? Oh, that's a little better. So you work towards the things that work and away from the things that don't. And that's not I probably could help a little bit in teaching that way now because of my own personal experience in that. But it is you just have to stumble through that stuff.
And to your point, I think bringing some of these, maybe having some critiques or having, them pitch in front of fellow students or fellow classmates, to get that feedback, that's where that's going to come from that experience.
I almost feel like if I had another student direct and then have another person edit something, I have no idea what it was, figure it out.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Just from all the things you're saying, I teach AP Studio Art, I teach fashion design, but we always collaborate with video all the time. And we're always talking about film, and they know I'm like obsessed with horror, but I'm really snobby on the horror. And you just said about remaking the French film, it's a totally different aesthetic to what Americans are, driven to. Than what
and that's just through the lens of an American looking at a French film compared to the same version of it. So I've already, somewhere in the back of my head, made a whole bunch of skewed adjustments for it.
And I just, every time you spoke about it, I kept thinking, oh my God. I was trying to explain to my students about how horrible the American remake of a Japanese horror movie is. It's just horrific because they eliminate all the subtlety and the simplicity, like you were talking about the love scene, and how just going at it is just not working, but the hesitation of the almost touching hand was the compelling element. And it's just like, there's so many, like even in Korean horror too, fantastic. Simplicity and just like, it's this suspense and this visual beauty and this horrific feeling you get because you don't know. And then the American remake is god-awful. It's just like
it's the Michael Bay version, as you would say.
Chopped it, shredded it, and they made it visually identical to think that, because it's visually the same, and we're going to do the same sound.
Translate, right.
It's going to give you the same feeling, and it totally, it lays flat. And,
Yeah. Back there.
Question.
Can you please share your editing theory, your editing workflow, your creative, the way that you put together a video? What are the steps you take?
Maybe we could kind of jump into some of the footage.
Sure. Let me show. I guess we'll do that. Where are we on time? Because this could go by really quick.
15. Are we at an hour? Yeah. So we got about 15 minutes to.
Okay.
Goes quick.
Why pay? I don't want to pay.
We've got 2 or 3 hours.
Oh, we do?
Sure.
Okay.
What are you going to do?
Yeah, right? Pick us out.
Nobody wants lunch.
I don't want to join your Wi-Fi
But
network.
while he's queuing this up, guys, you know, I have the fortunate opportunity to work with most of the schools across the U.S. So everything from your USCs all the way down to your local high school, junior colleges. What Chris is saying is absolutely true. You know, persevere, work hard, you know, follow your bliss. But keep in mind, there's not just the entertainment industry. I do a lot of work with Nike. I do a lot of work with all the pro sports teams throughout the U.S. They all have elements of video departments. So that's kind of the fun part here is maybe you decide to go off to Hollywood and you want to be a feature film editor, but maybe your passion's sports. I can tell you right now, the Dodgers, the Angels, the Giants, Padres all have video departments, and they're all out there shooting video. They're all out there collecting information in spring training. So these are in all the pro football teams, basketball teams, hockey teams. So there's some interesting ways to go with this that don't just pigeonhole you in the entertainment industry.
The March Madness.
Absolutely. Basketball, the colleges all have video programs, you know, where they've got their own networks and they're collecting information for ESPN.
And then there's sound.
Absolutely.
I mean, I would imagine that, I'm just going to make this number up, but I would imagine sound-related jobs are probably 5 or 10 to 1 to picture-related jobs, you know, across the country. I was, you know, in prep for this, I was thinking about, you know, I'm listening to Sirius Radio, and when you're listening to like the music station, you know, it's all assembled. I'm pretty sure it's all assembled like on Pro Tools.
Absolutely.
So, you know, you go, every church of a certain size in this country has a mixing board. Every theater has a mixing board. There, you know, everything is, you know, and on the Pro Tools front, I haven't seen any system other than Pro Tools in at least a decade. So there is no other professional tool.
And that's something to point out is that a lot of these large, what we call mega churches. Students.
You guys sell
School,
big
one
boards.
Of the largest churches that I deal with is the Mormon Church, and they can't get enough students or people to help them. So the schools in Utah are all teaching a lot of our products, so that they've got a built-in workforce because the church is always looking for new opportunities with individuals. Yes.
Just in terms of another market, there's many students who pursue sports, trying to get a scholarship.
Right.
And their parents, they throw big bucks for highlight reels to the tune.
Absolutely.
Crazy.
Absolutely. There's all these different ways, and there's companies now that are cropping up. They're doing nothing but, you know, taking all the footage you're gathering from your son or daughter and putting together a package that then goes out to YouTube or whatever. So, I mean, there's all kinds of great ways. No longer are you just a, you know, wedding or, you know, bar mitzvah. You know, there's all kinds of great other places to go with this. And that, you know, to everybody's point earlier and what Chris was saying, you know, it was $100,000 to build out an NFA. Today, for a student to own our software, they can own it for $9.99 a month.
Wow.
So we've gotten to the point where we're very competitive. You can, you know, and, you know, have all these tools in front of you that before were unattainable from a district and or a class.
Well, you're coming up with, you know, Avid First too,
Right.
you know, which will be free, right?
We're going to have a whole new model where we're going to be offering up a very basic level of our software for free. So for, you know, those that just want to get into it, kind of start playing with it. But then again, the full version for students or faculty, you know, $295 or $999.
Yeah, I mean, along that line,
A little scaled down to more of the entry level user.
it's something that a 6-year-old can use,
Right.
you know, for their skateboard video, you know, and you know, and what I've seen is Media Composer is the only real professional tool. You know, Final Cut has gone way by the wayside, and Adobe has a little bit of traction, but it's only really because they offer it for free as part of their Adobe suite, and so people have learned to use that because they had it. But what I found, and this is something that I think relates to you guys, is that like people that learned on Final Cut but then had to become Media Composer editors, everybody always likes the first thing they learned on. And so it becomes a disadvantage to try to now have you rewire your brain, so they're always kind of filtering it through the other system, where Media Composer really is the most logical, simplest system. I did one small movie on Final Cut, and I did it specifically to learn it.
Just to see.
And I hated my life every day. It was illogical. I mean, there were just things in Final Cut like, I can't remember what it was like Apple D is duplicate. Every Apple application, Apple D is duplicate. It's that way in Media Composer. It's not that way in Final Cut. it's something else. And it was like, it's their own.
Yeah.
But
Why don't we jump into
yeah, okay. So this is the very first, I mean, this was my actual first cut. And so, like this plane and a variety of other things are just things we ripped off the web, just as placeholders.
Hear something crazy? What's that? Did you see the big guy? When we got on LA? In first class, curly hair, cupcakes. What about him? Well, I've never seen him before. I couldn't remember where in AME. He's one of the Oceanic Six. Guy's got nerves of steel, man. He survives a full-on commercial airliner crash, and he's back flying over the same South Pacific. Yeah, well, maybe he doesn't believe that lightning will strike twice in the same place. You look like you're landing in Lombardia in a snowstorm, but you gotta relax. Visibility's 50 plus. There's no land or air traffic within 400 miles of us. You alright, good friend? I'm just fine. What? I have control. Forward! Do you want power to pull us out of this and rip us apart? It's all right. Altimeter 650. What the hell? Horsepower!
It's pretty basic.
I think it's great this way.
Great. The kid did this.
We're putting down. This is a June 316. We lost power. Mayday, mayday, mayday.
16, 42.
All flaps. Here's me. One thing. Stick this or we die. Reverse blasters! Run it out! Run it out! Hold on!
So as you can see, I just got these two guys in the cockpit, and you have to, with your imagination, tell the whole story. It may not be the right story, but it has to have some coherent storytelling component. And it took me forever to do that because I was also struggling with certain story things that didn't make sense. So that was the very first time I put it together, and so all the music, all the sound, stuff that comes out of the editing room, is what we did for that. So I screened it for Damon and Carlton, and we realized the flight path is wrong, as well as we could care less about these two guys, that we need to involve our other people in the back. So this is, and also, for me personally, everything I do is too long the first time through. It's so much easier to make it fat and pull it back than to give it the lean version, then go have to searching for stuff. So it's always, I know it's too much. I know I have too many reactions or this or that, but it's so much easier while you're assembling the scene and hunting for them to put all the ones you find in, and then get rid of the ones in the next version. And being that we're not working on film, you can have as many versions as you want. So next version. It was day outside that window.
Something crazy? What's that? Did you see the big guy when we got on in LA? In first class, curly hair, cupcakes. What about him? He's one of the Oceanic Six. Guy's got nerves of steel, man. He survives a full-on commercial airliner crash and he's back flying over the same South Pacific. Yeah, well, I believe that lightning will strike twice in the same place. You look like you're landing in a Barney in a snowstorm, really. You alright there, Fred? I'm just fine. Dude, you might want to fasten your seatbelt. What?
So what you see there in the forward thing was the very first rendering that Visual Effects gave us of their thing. And just as a general note to pass on or to be aware of, don't ever believe Visual Effects when they say, oh, we can do it, it'll be great. I mean, it sounds like a joke, but it really isn't. We could have flown a plane or a helicopter over a piece of an island and filmed this for less than this thing cost. And it never really wound up looking much better than a video game. Come on, close. And So in this next version, which is the final version here, it's cut down a little bit, and it's final visual effects. One thing we found is that when you have something that's kind of funky, like, you know, an action scene, putting a little vibration or shake on top of it really makes all the difference. It kind of blurs the background and all that. And to that point, like, not every shot in the plane was shot like this. There was a lot of shots that were shot far more stable, and we had to make it do that. And one thing we figured out on Lost that everybody I've ever told it to can't even believe it works. If you try to create it in Media Composer, it really basically does that XYZ axis stuff, and it'll kind of do this, but you can't get an organic movement. But if you can confine a piece where the camera is shaking and then ask Media Composer to stabilize it, and then you take the stabilize effect and put it on the normal stuff, and it's absolutely perfect. You know, it's just one of those things that, you know, you
trial and error.
Yeah, exactly. We just bumped into it one day. So here's the final. With a CG plane.
Something crazy? What's that? Did you see the big guy? We got on in LA. Sitting in first class, curly hair, contacts. He's one of the Oceanic 6. Guy's got nerves of steel, man. He survives a full-on commercial airliner crash. Now he's trying to find out if it's in South Pacific.
Yeah, well, maybe he doesn't believe that lightning will strike twice in the same place.
You alright there, Fred?
I'm just fine.
Dude, you might want to fasten your seatbelt.
Oh no.
Right.
That's so cool.
You know, and it's, you know, I took one editing class at SC, and I learned one thing for $650, and that was film is an illusion.
Yeah.
And so it's an illusion. You know, when you put the sound on it, when you put it in context of the story, that the total is greater than the sum of its parts. You know, and sound is where the magic is. It's the spackle. It's funny, about quite a while ago, I was home on a weekend and I had TV on and I was running around doing stuff in the house, and I think the original Road Warrior was on. And I had the sound down because I was been on and off the phone. And as I walked through where the TV was, and there was the big chase, and there was this, you know, which was incredible, right? And I realized that, like, the stuff with Mel Gibson, he's in the cab of the truck, and then he's, you know, jolted out onto the front of the truck, and then he's standing there trying to get the bullets. All that stuff was just shot into blue sky, and they were throwing dirt on him, you know? So with the sound absent, it was just
sterile.
It was nothing. In the context of the sequence, it was one of the best action sequences of all time in its day. You know?
It's like Stanley Kubrick, like, you know, Shining, one of my all-time faves. Like, they did a remake of that using Stephen King's book to what was in the book.
Right.
It was awful.
Yeah.
But the music is what moves you.
But I think the good news today, guys, is that students have access to all of these tools. These tools are very attainable. There's, you know, we provide curriculum to teach the software. We provide, you know, certificate programs for those students that may not be compelled to go off to college or want to be able to take that credential and move on into college. But I think what you've heard from Chris is that, you know, at the end of the day, this is about, you know, working hard, doing what you love, and just keep persevering, keep pushing hard. And it's folks like you that are going to provide that little fuel that kind of ignites these kids' imaginations to do great things. And I've seen it. I've been in a lot of different high schools where I first walked in and I got a passionate professor, a passionate faculty member, and that program just flourishes. It's really amazing what you can do. Yes?
How do we get you to come to our school?
I have a card. Call me. Happy to come out. I, too, have a background in the industry. I used to do reality TV 4 years ago, so all those bad TV shows that you've seen, I've had a hand in help make, so it's an interesting little world. Yes?
As you're saying, you know, basically if they give you shit to work with, what doesn't look like shit?
Well, put it this way. No, I mean, here's the real deal. It's a rare occasion when you're going to really turn crap into something golden. But what you do sometimes is you can turn crap into something that's just not too bad. Yeah. I mean, that's the all, you know, that it was unwatchable and you made it marginally acceptable, and that's your victory, you know. And as an editor too, that is a victory, you know, that you see, you know, you found a way to skin the cat and make it not suck. Oh, sure.
The kids who are doing the editors, the kids who are doing the acting.
Of course.
Oh, yeah.
But again,
it's not confined to high school, let me tell you.